In the city of Cupertino, all actions of local government fall under the authority of the City Council. 5 candidates are in the running for 3 seats on Cupertino City Council. As part of the City Channel's ongoing coverage of this race toward Election Tuesday, you're about to see an up-close and personal introduction to one of those 5 candidates. This is Candidates Q&A with tonight's featured City Council candidate, John Statton. Tonight's segment was recorded on Thursday, September 25th.
Hello, I'm Michael Cronk from the San Jose Mercury News, and this is Pam Marino of the Cupertino Courier. Today we'll be interviewing John Statton, one of 5 candidates for the Cupertino City Council. Good morning, John.
Good morning.
You are currently the Executive Director of the Cupertino Chamber of Commerce, which is chambers traditionally by nature are pro-business organizations. Would you consider yourself a pro-business candidate, or could you clarify what you think the direction of growth in Cupertino should be in the coming years?
Good question, Michael. The Chamber of Commerce in Cupertino has, for many years, been more than just a simple business organization. Instead, we're really a community booster organization. We're involved with things like the Art and Wine Summer Festival. We support the Tournament of Bands. You name it in terms of good causes in town, and the Chamber's been up to its elbows in supporting those over the years. Everything from Cupertino Community Services to Scout troops in one form or the other. And that's really because the Chamber views its role as not just a pro-business organization, but really pro-community organization. Now, of course, along that line, we also have a number of members that have looked at developments in town throughout the years. For instance, Hewlett-Packard wanted to be able to expand its community here in town, and we are supportive of HP's expansion plans, which are right now underway when they're building. And to that effect, what we try to do is we look at what are the needs of the local business community, and we look at the needs of the broader community, and we try to balance those kinds of needs back and forth between each other. And where it's appropriate for the Chamber to speak out in favor of growth and development, we have. And where it's appropriate for us not to speak out in favor of that, we've also remained silent or even taken stands and opposed to that. For instance, one of the stands that we took about a year or so ago was at the intersection of Stevens Creek and De Anza Boulevard. There was a proposal for developing a gas station on that corner. And rather than seeing a larger structure being developed there, we thought that a gas station was very appropriate. It wouldn't contribute to traffic on that intersection. It would in turn allow us as a community to kind of keep that intersection more human scale rather than being clogged with traffic the way I think most of us are feeling it's heading right now.
John, if Steve Jobs took Apple Computer out of Cupertino tomorrow, what plan of action should the city take to fill that void?
Pam, I think Steve would be crazy to take Apple out of this town. Apple's really woven into the fabric of Cupertino since it was begun here in the middle 70s. But Steve has been known to do crazy things at times, let's face it. And I think that one of the things that we as a community should be looking at is bringing an employer into that space that would be able to be a good citizen in town. I think one of the nice things about Apple is that it really has tried to be a good citizen. When I was working with Apple years ago, for instance, we donated computers to the Senior Center. We started a K through 8 multimedia competition among the school districts where students could develop multimedia projects and in turn get better use of computers and understanding of that technology. So Apple really has tried to be a good corporate citizen. I think that's the kind of thing that we'd look for to really go in and fill that space. Now, what tools the city has to be able to do that, I think that's something we need to look at. We, as a community, have very few economic development tools in our quiver, so to speak, and we need to be able to look at how we fill that up and make better use of economic development proposals and projects in the future. One of the problems that we have in town is that sales tax accounts for about 31% of our local general fund budget, and right now property tax only accounts for about 11%. And so it's really in our interest as a community to make sure that whatever business would come in to fill that space would bring really a large amount of sales tax along with it. And one thing I think that we as a town should be looking at requiring for a new person that comes into that space would be to actually have them have a sales office that would generate sales tax that in turn could help our community.
John, in recent council campaigns, there's been a great deal of high spending, in some cases use of consultants, in some cases outside money coming into the community. In your campaign, how much are you spending, and are you receiving any campaign contributions from outside the community or any special interest money?
Well, I'm not showing up at Buddhist temples asking nuns to help contribute, if that's what you're asking about. And in reality, I think that local city council campaigns are really local events. And to that end, I'm not employing consultants. We're really doing this as a grassroots effort. I have a campaign committee of about 15 people that have been working together for about the last 6 months in trying to figure out where we'd like to go as a community, what this campaign would be all about. And really, we look at this as really a campaign that's won by knocking on as many doors as possible and getting literature in the hands of as many people as possible so that we can explain what we're all about.
You're walking precincts?
I'm walking precincts. I think I'm up to 800 homes so far in the last 3 weeks since I've started walking. And by walking, you really kind of get a different perspective on things than you do in any other way. You learn that somebody's really upset about not having their garbage picked up on time, or that a turn at the end of their street is only going one way when they'd like it to go 2 ways, or that the city is not making sure that the median is being watered right next to their house in the way they like to be so that the flowers are growing. You learn all about the small things that really affect people's lives that really people care very passionately about. Tip O'Neill used to say that all politics was local. And in reality, all politics is really neighborhood-based. And while I'm walking in the neighborhoods, I'm learning what people's concerns are, and I think that's very valuable.
What responsibility does city government have to foster understanding between the city's diverse cultures?
You've probably hit on one of the questions that I'm hearing most often when I'm knocking on doors. And in reality, this is a new role for our community to play. In the last 10 years, we've really accelerated the diversity in our town, and in general, that's really brought a lot of positives to our community. The people that are moving into our town are generally very well educated. They're in jobs that are very well paid. They're in turn able to keep up their property, and it's a nice change for our town over the long run. But in the short run, it creates some tensions and some problems in the community. And I think that some of the things that the city's doing to help neighbors get to know each other is really the things that we need to be looking at more in the future. And these are simple things. The citywide garage sale, for instance, gets people out of their homes and meeting their neighbors. Working on neighborhood disaster preparedness programs, I think, is a very effective way for getting neighbors to work together and meet each other. When you have a neighborhood full of friends and acquaintances and not just strangers, at that point you begin to have a strong neighborhood, and people do get to know each other, and those barriers between different ethnicities are really kind of broken down. Other things that the city is doing, and some of the things that I've been involved with, is the whole diversity summits that we've been holding throughout the years, and I propose that we continue those. In fact, I was part of the initial panel in the first diversity summit a couple of years ago, talking about how the changing community would continue to change in that way. And also things like the 4th of July fireworks. It brings people out in a uniting holiday that everybody can take a part in. And I was really pleased to be a part of the first committee that put together the 4th of July fireworks 2 seasons ago. And we'd like to see that continue in the future as well.
Let's talk about Valco. There's been a great deal of discussion, a great deal of concern in the community about the state of that center. Do you have any specific proposals or ideas on how to bring revitalization to the center?
Well, part of my role as Chamber of Commerce executive has been serving on the city's Economic Development Committee, and this is one of those issues that the Economic Development Committee, which is composed of residents and businesses and city officials together, are meeting to talk about these kinds of concerns and how we can have a strong local economy. I'm going to be leaving the Chamber in November, and I'm going to be looking at, or after November I should say, and I'm going to be looking at continuing to work on issues like Valco. But when it comes right down to it, Valco's problem is that it has a horrible tenant mix. And if you walk through Valco right now, you're finding that tenant mix continues to erode. With the Emporium leaving, with Federated coming in and putting effectively a very low-end clearance center in that mall, that's not the direction that mall should be heading. We really need a high-end facility there that can really compete effectively with Stanford and with Valley Fair shopping centers. And we really have the demographics in this town to be able to support such a center. Valco right now is making up a large chunk of our city's sales tax. Although that's been going down, it's still a very large chunk. And it's one of those things that we really need to be able to pay very close attention to. I was proud that I was one of the first people to suggest that we actually send city officials to talk to the owners of the mall and express our concern, and that was really the beginning of a process of dialogue between the mall owners and the city that hopefully is going to be leading to a new ownership structure that will be taking place this fall. And if we get a new owner in that mall, and if the city can work with that owner, we'll be able to in turn make sure that we get the right kind of tenant mix in there that's going to make our people want to shop in Valco. In fact, I think I've mentioned this to a couple of people. My wife and I were chatting the other night, and she says that that I should not rest until I make sure that an Ann Taylor is brought into that mall. And I don't know if that's quite the solution, but it would sure make shopping locally a lot more palatable.
What about the idea of movie theaters?
Movie theaters, entertainment in malls is one of those things that's very popular these days. Other solutions for malls have been citing civic activities such as police substations in malls or senior centers in malls, things like that. I don't think those are the directions that we necessarily need to go with this one. Especially about movie theaters, I'll be somewhat concerned because we're opening a 20-screen theater not more than about 4 or 5 miles away, and I think this valley is going to be somewhat saturated with movie theaters relatively quickly. I want to see a long-term strategy for that mall that can really work for us rather than a quick fix solution.
Do you think a redevelopment agency is an answer there at Valco?
I think a redevelopment agency is the answer not just for Valco, but for a lot of issues that we have in town. Redevelopment is somewhat of a complex subject in terms of how it works, but effectively what it boils down to is it gives the city a lot more control over how it revitalizes its business community. And if any of you have been driving up and down Stevens Creek Boulevard lately, you know that we have a lot of very aging shopping centers, and what we really need to do is look for a strategy on how we're going to get this town as a whole lifted up so that we can in turn generate some greater sales tax. But the point about having good shopping in town is only one aspect of this. The reason why you want good shopping in town is because we all don't want to pay more as residents for the city services we currently receive. And if we have good sales tax income, we in turn don't have to pay more as local residents. And I think that's pretty important to people.
Let's talk the budget. Let's talk money.
Good.
The city has currently has a very healthy reserve of some $19 million. Where would you like to see, and what community needs would you like to see some of that money put to use? Facilities or parks, or where would you like to see it go?
This kind of gets around to where my philosophy on local government really kind of comes from. I think local government's is really in business to provide services for people, and really high quality services. And these are services like a senior center, like a library, like our parks and recreation facilities in town. I mean, that's the essence of local government. That's why local government is so exciting for me, and I think for other people when they sit and think about it, because it's the level of government that really gives you things that you can touch and you can affect very clearly. Right now, as you pointed out, the city is building up a whale of a large surplus. In the past, our reserve level has been somewhere between 3/4 of our annual general fund budget and moving towards a full annual fund budget and reserves. This is way more than any other city in the Bay Area actually has. And in fact, we're adding to those reserves with the sale of the water district, or the lease of the water district, I should say. Our reserves are going to top out over $30 million. From my point of view, this is craziness. You don't have a city government dedicated towards building up a big reserve level. I mean, there's no point in it. The only point towards building reserves is you're actually going to use them for something. And so what I would advocate is that we either use our reserves for something very effectively, very quickly, and things that we need in town, or else we actually start thinking about giving it back to the residents in some format, either through lower fees or else through a direct check in the mail. And it's kind of odd to hear people say that, but why are we sitting on upwards of $30 million as a community? Now, where I would like to spend that money, where I think it could be effectively spent, is I think it's primarily two different areas. And both these are kind of big ticket items, but both are really necessary. And one is expanding our senior center. If any of you have been in the center lately, you find that it's a phenomenally well-used facility, but very, very overcrowded at the same time because it's so well-used. And if you also look at the demographics of our town, we're all going to be getting a little bit older. And for that reason, we need to be able to sit and think that, well, if we're all getting a little older, we're all going to be using that center a little more effectively. So let's see if we can build a center that really is going to meet that need. Now, on the other end of our community is the library. And we have a library that is also very, very well used and very, very well loved. And in fact, I was pleased to be a part of the group that helped put together the library campaign a couple of years back that helped extend the hours and keep our library system going as a whole. But that campaign basically did not afford us funds to actually expand or contribute to the expansion of that library. And so to that end, I'd look at expanding the library, I'd look at expanding the senior center, And I look at that because we really have two commitments as a town. One of them is to our youth, and another of them is to our seniors. And if you take good care of your seniors and take good care of your kids, then you're doing pretty well as a town.
A Courier reader wrote to us recently stating that, in her opinion, life here in Cupertino has eroded over the last 10 years. She attributed it to what she called an alarming growth rate. And she wants to know what the candidates would do about it. How would you answer her?
I think this is, if I was going to prioritize questions as I'm hearing walking door to door, this is probably the number one question that's on people's minds. If you look around, we are effectively built out as a community. There is really no more space for us to grow. And with the exception of the tandem parcel that's down on Stevens Creek Boulevard, that's it for us as a town. In the last 4 years especially, I think we've done a very good job of controlling office space and R&D growth. We've only approved about 600,000 square feet in the last 4 years in that way. And so a lot of that stuff is still being built right now, so we have to kind of wait and see what the traffic impacts of those are going to be. I'm thinking of the Symantec headquarters building near the intersection of Stevens Creek and De Anza. But where I think we've gone really wrong with this whole growth debate is that we've not also taken into account the whole issue about housing. And in the last 4 years, we've approved over 1.2 million square feet of new housing growth in town. And again, a lot of that growth is beginning to come online right now as well. We've got so much housing in this town that one of the new projects is over near Wolf and Prune Ridge cannot even be accommodated within the Cupertino schools without excess overcrowding. So they had to annex it into an adjacent city to be able to handle the kids that are going to be generated from that project. Well, one of the problems with housing growth in town like that is that you get two things. One is you get traffic not only generated from those new housing units, but that traffic is available on weekends and on evenings when most of the residents in town are thinking that, oh, we finally get a little break from traffic because all the employees are gone. Well, in reality, we're going to find those cars are going to be backing up our streets and our roads all throughout the weekends. The other thing that we get from this is that that kind of housing in town really creates to a real dense feeling in our community. When you begin to infill every little pocket that you have across your community with more housing, you tend to get monster homes on very, very small lots, and those in turn really begin to affect privacy and balance within a neighborhood. When before you were a single-family residential community and you had homes that really were mostly single-story, now all of a sudden you've got two-story, in some cases, I don't know if we have any three-story homes in town, but I wouldn't be surprised if we head there in the future. Unless we've somehow put a stop to it. But two-story homes suddenly means that you got people looking into your backyards that you traditionally didn't have. Some neighborhoods, in fact, have even gone so far as to petition the Planning Commission to put a freeze on double-story construction in their neighborhoods and keep it as a single-story construction. And I think that neighborhood activism like that, where people are saying, hey, we want to keep our neighborhood as balanced and as healthy as we can, I think is really important. Now, the other balance to this is, of course, how do you balance property rights from a homeowner? And I think that's one of the tough decisions that you have to put before the City Council each and every time a project comes up before it. So that's kind of my viewpoint on growth and kind of where I come from.
Another growth-related question, because it is a central issue.
Yeah, it really is.
In Cupertino. In past campaigns, there's been debate or discussion of the general plan, the 1993 general, which allowed what some people felt was an enormous amount of growth for the big three in town, and campaigned to change that tiered growth and that square footage. What's your position on, if you were on the council, would you vote to make any changes in the general plan regarding that kind of growth for business?
Let me say right out that I would be in favor of what they're calling Tier 2 growth, of lopping that off right at the heels. This might sound a little funny, but in reality, I think that kind of growth is really, and I've kind of come around to this viewpoint over the last 4 years, and that kind of growth is really excessive. And I think where we went wrong with the general plan is that we went to each of the large companies, this is we being the city, went to each of the large companies in the early 1990s and said, give me your wildest growth estimates for the next 20 years. And each of the large companies then said, okay, well, this might be how much we would ever want to grow. And then the city took those numbers and said, well, that's how much growth we have to be able to provide in our community. Well, that was a crazy way to do it, because all it did was put a huge number up on the books that scared the heck out of everybody in town. In reality, none of that growth was going to happen, or very little of that growth was going to happen. And in turn, it's really cast a real divisive element in our town. It's really pitted the companies against the residents, and that's not the right way to do it. Instead, what I would say is that you you really have to look at things on almost a project-by-project basis. If you have real good design, you can really overcome a lot of growth problems. I'm not advocating big growth here, but I'm advocating real quality design. I don't think that in Cupertino we've had quality design up till now. I look at the brick buildings on the corner of Stevens Creek and De Anza, and I think those things are hideous in terms of their appearance. I look at, and also effectively how they work. If you ever watch cars getting in and out of there, it really dumps people right into a very busy intersection at a really undesirable time in a lot of cases. You even look at the 2 tall towers that Apple has been occupying over the last several years. Well, those towers are not exactly the most attractive buildings I've ever seen either, and in turn they create a feeling of density and high growth that really I think people in this town really object to. And so I'd say that when you look at growth in the future, you have to make sure that it really fits in your community, it really is going to add to your community, not detract from it, and it really should be something that you can be proud of as a town, not something that you feel like you should be running away from.
Kaiser said it won't be pursuing a permit to burn tires in its cement kiln right now, but cement industry lobbyists are hard at work in Sacramento trying to go at it from that direction and possibly even one day mandate tire burning. What is your position on tire burning, and what would you do if Kaiser pursues a permit in the future?
Okay. Also a question that's been on the minds of a lot of people as I've walked around. And I really would do 2 things. One of them is that I'd look at saying, is there going to be a community health risk from anything that Kaiser's proposing to do up there? And if there is a community health risk, then that's something that we as a town need to be very concerned about, and that we in turn should be taking very, very seriously. But the second thing I'd look at doing is assessing Kaiser's proposals in terms of what community benefit is there for Cupertino by having this. Is there anything that's going to be strongly in our city's interest to be able to allow that kind of industrial use to be able to happen up there? And so far, from what I understood from Kaiser's initial proposal, was there really was nothing for Cupertino, and there was a potential health risk, and so why support it? And when it comes right down to it, I think that's the kind of question most people ask themselves.
One of the big things that the city provides is public safety services. In this case, police and fire primarily. What is your assessment of police protection services in Cupertino currently, and fire services? Are you satisfied with it? Do you think there are areas that there are areas for improvement in delivery of those services?
I don't want to say there's no areas of improvement, because I'll be the first to say that in most areas of government you could probably go in and find something to improve, some way to make things better, and that's something that I hope I'd be able to bring to the table. But in general, I'd say that we have one of the best police services and one of the best fire services in the entire Santa Clara Valley here in Cupertino. We are a very safe community, and it's because of the dedication of our police and our fire people. I think one of the things that we also need to be looking at, though, in the future is how do you involve your neighborhoods in your police and police and fire and disaster preparedness? Because in reality, you can't just rely upon police people and fire people to keep you safe. You have to in turn make sure that you're out there as a resident working with other residents, so that if there's a next time the earthquake happens, the people in your neighborhood need to know each other and need to be able to work with each other. And you may not be able to find police and fire. They may not be able to get to your neighborhood for a while. So you need to be really able to prepared to go in and take matters into your own hands to be able to keep yourself safe and secure. And so that reason, I think the city's disaster preparedness program that Marie Moore has put together is really a model that I'd like to see taken into each of the neighborhoods in our community, and see if people in turn would sit and work with each other and get to know each other. This again has an added benefit of helping people get to know their neighbors in a way that's very unthreatening. If I'm feeling like most people when I knock door to door, open the door and kind of peer out like, what am I going to be trying to sell them? And when they realize I'm a city council candidate, they kind of smile and will take the literature and everything else. Well, that kind of distrust of each other that I'd like to see begin to be dispelled in our community. And I think if you work with your neighbors and get to know them a little bit through things like neighborhood watch programs or disaster preparedness programs, at that point you really can be, you can have a much healthier community and people get along a lot better.
One of the other issues that I hear residents talking about from time to time is graffiti. It seems to ebb and flow at times. Lately it seems to be a little bit more. Do you think the city's doing enough to combat graffiti? Do you have any suggestions for what else it could do?
It's a good question. The city has a graffiti abatement program that has been pretty effective so far, and if you compare Cupertino to other towns in the valley, you find that we actually stack up pretty well in terms of how we take care of our graffiti. And I think one of the reasons why is because we don't let it accumulate. We don't, basically when graffiti appears, we jump on it. We talk to the property owner, we make sure they abate it, or else we try to track down the kids. We have a tipster program that helps kids tip about who's putting up graffiti, and hopefully we can in turn help abate it in that way as well. But really what it comes down to is the same thing they found in New York recently. This will sound a little funny with New York on one end and Cupertino on the other, but what's happening in New York is that they've really taken almost a zero tolerance attitude towards small crimes, and in turn that's helped keep down the level of big crimes. And I think graffiti is one of those things here in town as well, that if you pay attention to your small crimes, you keep your community vigilant about those, and you make sure that people deal with those very effectively right when they first appear, it helps keeping things from sliding down towards an area where you might have bigger crimes starting to happen in the future. And so for that reason, I think that graffiti is a symptom that you deal with very quickly and very effectively, and in turn keeps you from having to deal with bigger problems in the long term.
Well, John, it looks like we're out of time. Thanks for joining us today, and good luck on your campaign.
Well, thank you both for your time today. I appreciate it very much.
Election Tuesday is November 4th. Please vote for the 3 candidates best suited to serve on Cupertino City Council. And keep watching the City Channel for more special City Council election programming.